king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 263, The Age of Artillery, Part 2. Marin had a beautiful idea, but in that era, even the Europeans who began to equip warships with cannons were not very sure about the effectiveness of the cannons. Strictly speaking, the first large-scale use of artillery by Europeans in naval warfare was the Battle of Joe fought by the Portuguese in India. Before that, the Venetians and Genoese had fought many times in the Mediterranean, but most of them were the old boarding battle mode. In the Battle of Joe, the Portuguese fleet relied on its artillery advantage to destroy enemy ships with heavy artillery at a certain distance. When the enemy ships approached, they used muskets to prevent the enemy sailors from jumping off the ship. Then, they threw grenades to kill and injure the enemy ships. Grenade. Oh, why did I forget this? Marin slapped his head, regretting it. When two ships approached, one side threw a grenade at the other ship, which was definitely enough to cause damage. Although the grenades of this era still used black gunpowder, which was not very powerful. However, the explosion of the grenade would also produce a burning effect. And the burning effect was very deadly to wooden ships. Moreover, even if the explosion of the grenade filled with black gunpowder was not powerful enough to destroy the enemy's wooden ship, it could still kill and injure a lot of sailors on the enemy's deck. As the ships of both sides gradually approached, Marin had no time to think. Although Captain Kidd had rich sailing experience, he was a complete layman when it came to using artillery in naval battles. Because, I remember that the captain had only learned boarding battles. Now, with the number and quality of combatants at a disadvantage, boarding battles with opponents would definitely be a death wish. Therefore, Marin simply took over the command and began to use his ability to talk about war on paper to command this naval battle. With Marin shouting, the two ships lined up and aimed their guns at the four approaching pirate ships. Marin was actually very curious about why such a large-scale pirate group appeared on the Moroccan Sea. You know, in the era when the great navigation had not yet flourished, gathering 4 pirate ships and 200 pirates was definitely a large-scale pirate organization. In this era, the main market for pirates was actually in the Mediterranean. Because the shipping trade in the Mediterranean was relatively developed. As for the North Sea and the Baltic Sea, although shipping was also developed, there were 2 maritime hegemons here, Denmark and the Hanseatic League. Under the suppression of the 2 hegemons, there were fewer pirates. The Mediterranean Sea was too large, and although Venice was strong, it did not have the ability to control such a large Mediterranean. Therefore, pirates were still rampant in the Mediterranean. However, before the opening of the Indian route, pirates in the Atlantic Ocean had no money at all. What Marin didn't know was that these pirates were actually officially supported by Morocco. Their purpose was to cause trouble for the Spanish and Portuguese. Because Spain and Portugal built strongholds along the coast of Morocco, engaged in large-scale colonization, and encroached on Moroccan territory. In retaliation, the Moroccans specially recruited a group of ferocious Moorish pirates, who, with the secret funding of the Moroccan royal family, cruised in the Atlantic Ocean west of Morocco and specifically intercepted Spanish merchant ships going to the Canary Islands or Portuguese merchant ships going to the West African coast for trade and colonization. Unfortunately, Marin's 2 ships were targeted by 4 pirate ships. The pirates believed that such large ships must be trading ships, and the profits must be huge. Therefore, these brutal pirates obviously regarded Marin's 2 ships as 2 fat sheep. Seeing the 2 sides getting closer and closer, at a distance of 1,000 meters, Marin, unable to hold his temper, ordered the artillery to start firing. The 12-pound cast iron cannon on board had a range of more than 1,000 meters. However, the hit rate at a distance of 1,000 meters was really impressive. In addition, half of the gunners on board were apprentices. Then, one iron ball after another hit the pirate ship in front of or behind it, creating splashes of water. The pirates were initially frightened by the roar of the cannons on Marin's 2 ships, but when they saw that the hit rate of Marin's fleet's cannons was so unreliable, they felt relieved and continued to move forward. In fact, Marin's order to fire in advance was not entirely out of nervousness. Instead, the gunners also needed to get a feel for the situation first. The first few rounds of artillery fire were actually meant to be calibration fire. However, both new and old gunners were not proficient in how to fire on warships. For example, the gunners who had served in the Thorlandshire and Odysseald forts were not used to the ship swaying from side to side, because the swaying of the deck would seriously affect the accuracy of shooting. Before, when operating the coastal defense artillery, they were very confident that they could hit the enemy warships even at a distance of 1,000 meters. But when firing on the ship, at a distance of 1,000 meters, even these experienced gunners had no accuracy at all. Turn rudder and sail southeast, trying to be perpendicular to the enemy fleet. Remember to keep a distance and don't get stuck with the enemy. We will use artillery and not engage in boarding battles. Marin shouted on the stern deck. The sailors on the ship were relieved when they heard that they would not engage in boarding battles with the pirates. These sailors, who had no martial arts skills, were most afraid of fighting with the pirates who were good at using knives. Marin and the gunners soon began to figure out how to shoot more accurately. Of course, in order to prevent the gun from exploding, Marin kept shouting beside the gunners, after firing, remember to use a wet sponge to cool the barrel and extinguish the sparks. If there are sparks left in the barrel, the gunner is likely to get into trouble when loading the ammunition next time, and be killed or injured. The wet sponge can not only extinguish the remaining sparks in the barrel, but also cool the barrel to prevent it from overheating and causing the barrel to explode. This was something Marin specifically mentioned when he was watching BTV translating an American military program in his previous life. After the first shot is fired, the naval gun will slide backwards due to the recoil. The base of the naval gun is different from that of the land-based gun. The land-based gun has 2 wheels and a bracket at the back. The naval gun generally has 4 wheels, and the shape of the wheels is also very special, not round, but hexagonal or octagonal. Such wheels have great friction and are difficult to roll. But once rolling, the force unloading effect is also great. Moreover, a rope is tied behind the 4-wheeled gun carriage before firing. When the artillery retreats due to recoil, it not only has to overcome the resistance of the 4 wheels that are not round enough, but also the resistance of the rope. Generally speaking, the gun carriage will break the rope. However, in the process of breaking the rope, the recoil of the gun is also unloaded a lot. In this way, the retreat distance of the 4-wheeled gun carriage becomes limited, and the resetting of the gun is also easier. After the first shot was fired, the gunners began to work together. First, the first person held a wooden pole with a wet sponge and stirred it inside the barrel to extinguish the sparks and cool the barrel. Then, the second person used a wet sponge to clean up the mess. Then, the third person used a dry sponge to clean the barrel and began to load the gunpowder. After that, the iron ball was loaded into the barrel, compacted, and a seal was installed on the fire hole. Finally, of course, all the members of the artillery team worked together to push the gun carriage back to its original position. The guns on the gun carriages had almost no elevation angle, and were all placed forward and horizontally, trying to hit the enemy ship on the horizontal line. However, because the ship swayed frequently horizontally, it was very difficult to shoot and aim. After entering the 500-meter range, the first few rounds of bombardment were still inaccurate, and the iron balls fell into the sea. In fact, firing a naval gun requires great skill. When the ship is shaking from side to side, the gun should not be fired. Because if the shaking gun can hit the enemy ship, it would be a disaster. Experienced gunners usually pay close attention to the lateral shaking of the ship under their feet. For example, when the ship just returns to a horizontal position, it is the best time to fire. At this angle, the probability of the cannon hitting the target is the highest. However, even if you know this principle, it is still difficult to control the timing of firing. Because even if you master the timing of the ship's shaking, it is not enough. In addition, the gunner also needs to master the timing of the seal burning. It is best that the ship just shakes to a horizontal position at the moment the seal burns. But in fact, even if these 2 points are achieved, it is not necessarily accurate. Because a ship may not have only one cannon. If other cannons fire first, the recoil caused by them will change the time when the ship shakes. The timing calculated by the gunner before may become wrong. Therefore, in naval battles, in the era of smoothbore guns, the probability of a naval gun hitting an enemy ship was very low. Even at a close distance of 500 meters, it was difficult for an average gunner to achieve a 10% hit rate. If you want a higher hit rate, then learn from Nelson and boldly get close to the enemy ship, close together. However, this is very dangerous. Even if your subordinates are all well-trained sailors, it is still not possible. For example, Nelson himself accidentally died. Of course, Marin was not willing to take this risk, because his men were still inexperienced and many sailors lacked courage. So he chose to fight the enemy and then gamble on the hit rate of the artillery. Chapter 264, The Age of Artillery, Part 2, the warships of both sides were about to meet each other, but Marin gave an order to sail the ships to the east. In this direction, the speed of Marin's fleet was the fastest. Then, the pirates' first attempt at boarding failed. But at the same time, none of Marlin's 16 naval guns hit the enemy ship's hull, and only one shell tore off a triangular sail of the enemy ship. Soon, one of the enemy pirate ships was left behind because its sail was damaged and its maneuverability decreased. It was busy changing the spare sail. Afterwards, like 2 knights who had charged too far, the fleets of both sides adjusted their directions again. The goal of the pirate fleet was to get close to Marin's fleet and then engage in a boarding battle. And Marin's goal was to keep the distance between the two sides, not too close, so as not to be successfully boarded by the other side. But not too far, otherwise the artillery would be completely inaccurate. Fortunately, the speed of Marlin's ship is about the same as that of the pirate's ship. If it were an old-fashioned caravel, there is a high possibility that the pirates would catch up. In the following time, the fleets of both sides circled in the sea. The pirates just couldn't catch up with Marin's fleet, and Marin's gunners couldn't hit it either. Gradually, Marin's patience was running out. At the same time, his anger was aroused. Marin is a somewhat mean person, but at the same time, he is also a somewhat passionate person. Under normal circumstances, he will not charge recklessly. However, when he is really angry, he will abandon those thoughts of self-preservation and fight hard. After circling around the pirate ship for a long time, the passion in Marin's heart was finally ignited. Order, get 300 meters closer to the pirates, and we will open fire at a distance of 200 meters. My Lord Earl, please think twice. This is too dangerous. Captain Kidd advised. What's the danger? Isn't it still 200 meters away? My lord, the distance control is not so precise. If we are not careful, the distance between the two sides may be less than 100 meters. The other side seems to have bows and arrows on the ship. If they hurt my lord, it will be bad. These Moorish pirates did carry some bows and arrows, and they were heavy infantry bows. If they were projectiles, they could really shoot more than 200 meters away. That's easy, Garland. Take out my plate armor. I want to put it on and stand on the deck to command the battle. Other guards, put on breastplate armor. Seeing that Marin himself was not afraid, how could his guards be afraid? So Marin and 50 guards all boarded the deck to prevent the enemy from taking the opportunity to jump off the ship to help. When the distance reached 200 meters, the hit rate of the ship's guns was greatly improved. Some shells began to fall on the enemy ship. Marin found through the telescope that several pirates were injured by an iron ball shell. Marin even saw that an unlucky pirate was directly hit by the iron ball shell and ran away with a bloody head. At this time, the pirates were really angry. They couldn't catch up with the enemy for a long time, which made them very angry. So, the pirate leader, One-Eyed Ollie on the flagship in the front shouted, "Everyone go rowing, take out the spare oars, we must catch up with the European boat." After saying that, One-Eyed Ollie personally took an oar and ran to help row. When the pirates on the deck saw that their boss was rowing the boat, they all went to the cabin to get the spare oars and rowed on the side. Then, in Marin's surprised eyes, the speed of the Arab sailboat in the front suddenly increased and rushed towards the 2501 ship in the front. The 2501 ship was still keeping its original speed, and the distance between the two ships was only 200 meters, so the two ships were likely to meet. Go to the cabin and take out the muskets and ammunition. Everyone, get ready to fire. Marin ordered the 50 guards around him. These guards were all elites carefully selected by Schwartz and Kohler. They were not only strong in fighting, but also knew how to use muskets. If the production of clockwork muskets was not too low, they would have brought clockwork muskets. However, due to the shortage of stock, they used the musket muskets. Half an hour later, the distance between the two ships was reduced to 50 meters. At this time, the Moorish pirates were still shooting with bows and arrows on the deck. But at the same time, Marin and his guards also began to fight back with the musket muskets. Swish, swish, swish. Moorish arrows began to fall from the sky. However, because the Moorish pirates had spent too much energy paddling before, their archery became a little soft. On Marin's deck, only 2 unlucky sailors were shot. As for him and his guards, because they were wearing plate armor, they almost ignored the opponent's arrows. And Marin's guards used matchlock guns and began to cause casualties to the opponent one after another. Of course, at this distance, the most advantageous thing is the artillery. A distance of 50 meters is already very close. At this time, the veteran gunners on the ship can finally aim easily. The 8 12-pound guns on the 2501 were all aimed at the side of the approaching Moorish pirate ship. Boom boom boom. After a round of volleys, 3 naval guns hit the target. Wood chips flew everywhere on the Moorish pirate ship, and the pirates were injured. What's going on? One-Eyed Ollie asked hurriedly, running over from the other side. Chief, our ship's side was hit by a cannon. It seems that the cannon on the enemy ship is very powerful, and the iron ball is quite big, said a pirate. Heavy artillery? Could it be that the enemy's ship is a warship? However, this appearance looks very much like a merchant ship. One-Eyed Ollie was a little confused. He was very familiar with Portuguese and Spanish ships. As a leader who had been professionally robbing Spanish and Portuguese merchant ships for 20 years, he could tell at a glance whether the opponent's ship was a merchant ship or a warship. Generally speaking, warships have taller towers, more cannons, and soldiers on the decks. However, these two ships have few people and few cannons. The towers are only at the rear, so they are obviously merchant ships. While he was still wondering, more shells poured down. Bang, boom, boom, several more 12-pound iron balls hit the ship. This time, 2 pirates were killed on the spot. One of them died miserably, being smashed into a meat pie. The pirates finally started to get scared, and One-Eyed Ollie ordered them to turn around immediately. He also realized that the gunners on the other ship were not accurate and could not hit the target at a distance. But it was too late. The gunner on the 2501 seemed to have found his rhythm, and his shots were getting smoother and smoother, with his shells hitting the target frequently. Then, the pirate ship, One-Eyed Ollie, led by One-Eyed Ollie, was hit by several more shells when it turned. When the One-Eyed Ollie completed its turn and began to flee, a shell hit the previously battered deck, and then penetrated the side of the ship that had just been bombarded, creating a large hole. Suddenly, seawater began to flood in. Oh no! Our boat is taking on water. Go and plug the leak. However, what made them despair was yet to come. Before, when the 2501 and the One-Eyed Ollie faced off head-on, the 2502 was blocked behind and did not dare to fire, fearing that it would accidentally hurt Marlin on the 2501. But when the One-Eyed Ollie turned, the 2502 also took the opportunity to rush out from the side and began to frantically bombard the One-Eyed Ollie. At a distance of dozens of meters, the veteran gunners were still very reliable. Therefore, under the salvo of 16 broadside guns from the 2 ships, the One-Eyed Ollie, whose ship walls were not thick enough, could not withstand it anymore. The One-Eyed Ollie is a classic medieval boarding warship, which only considers the possibility of collision. Therefore, its bow is very strong and collision resistant. But the thickness of the side is average. Because when these ships were designed, they did not consider the problem of being bombarded. Then, in front of the shocked eyes of the pirates on the 3 pirate ships behind, the side of the One-Eyed Ollie was smashed, and it began to take on a lot of water and began to sink. In desperation, the pirate leader, One-Eyed Ollie, had to abandon his ship and board a small boat to escape to another pirate ship. At the same time, the 3 pirate ships also began to release small boats to rescue the pirates who fell into the water. Marlin immediately found an opportunity and ordered 2 ships to bombard the 3 pirate ships. However, the other 3 ships were a little far from Marin's ship. And Marin's gunners were not used to long-range bombardment. Therefore, the hit rate was very low. In the end, the 3 pirate ships were only hit a few times, and although the damage was not serious, it was not serious. In this way, the 3 pirate ships fled hastily towards Morocco. Marin wanted to chase, but with the triangular sail, his ship was no faster than the pirate ship. And with the cross sail, it was not with the wind. The pirates were fleeing in the southeast, not the northeast, so it was difficult to catch up. Even if he caught up, he would have to get close to the coast of Morocco. If a bunch of Moorish pirate ships suddenly appeared, he would not be able to escape. In the end, Marin gave up the pursuit and continued to sail south to the Canary Islands according to the original plan. This naval battle was the first time in Europe that the enemy ships were attacked mainly by the power of artillery fire. Through the naval battle, Marin also discovered many problems. For example, naval battles also require courage. If Marin had approached the ship earlier and concentrated his salvos on the enemy ships, he might have secured victory. Of course, that would also be dangerous. Because it would be dangerous if the sailors on the ship were boarded. Even Marin himself might have been hacked to death by the enemy. Therefore, Marin believed that if there were enough musketeers and grenadiers on board to prevent the enemy from jumping off the ship to help cut people, it would be safe to use heavy artillery to approach and bombard. Moreover, the closer you get, the greater the power of the bombardment. In short, while using musketeers to block the enemy from jumping off the ship, using a large number of heavy artillery and firing close to the enemy ship will easily bring devastating blows. The era of artillery has arrived, and boarding battles will gradually withdraw from the stage of history until they are completely replaced. Chapter 265, Where did the Earl come from? When Marin's fleet arrived at Las Palmas, the capital of the Canary Islands, it aroused the high alert of the port garrison. The red flag with the golden 3-capped eagle of the Bloch family hoisted by Marin was something that Baron Sandro stationed in Las Palmas had never seen before. As far as he could remember, there was no Spanish noble family crest that looked like this. Even neighboring Portugal didn't seem to have such a crest. So Baron Sandro decisively ordered the cannon to fire a shot as a warning. Marin had no choice but to stop the fleet, and then he personally took a small boat to the shore and showed Baron Sandro the appointment document issued by the Spanish royal couple. Unfortunately, Baron Sandro was stationed in the Canary Islands for a long time, and he had little information about many things on the mainland. Therefore, he had never heard of Marin being named the Count of the Wilderness. You must have heard about how I cured Prince John, right? Marin was helpless about Baron Sandro's lack of information. This. I have heard a little bit about it. Baron Sandro was also embarrassed. It was not his fault that he was out of touch with the news. He had been stationed in the Canary Islands far away from his homeland for several years. Moreover, he had no powerful allies in the court who would pass on various news to him. However, the document did look authentic. When he compared it with his own appointment document, he found that the handwriting on the two documents was indeed the same. However, Baron Sandro was cautious by nature, and when he allowed the two ships to dock, he ordered the soldiers to be on guard. Then, when the people on the ship landed, Baron Sandro also asked Marin's 50 men to temporarily hand over their plate armor, muskets and swords to him for safekeeping. Then, Marin and 50 guards settled down in a large house near the governor's palace in Las Palmas with nothing in their hands. In addition, several wounded on the ship who were shot by bows and arrows also went ashore for recuperation and treatment with the Mongolian Dr. Bader who was on board with medicine. At the same time, Baron Sandro sent several speedboats back to the port of Cadiz, Spain, to verify the authenticity of the news that Marin was named Count of Spain. Baron Sandro agreed to Marin's request to send a ship out to sea to welcome Captain Zorro who was going on an ocean adventure. However, he only allowed Marin's sailors to board the ship for inspection. Marin and his guards had to stay on the ground temporarily. Before leaving, Marin suddenly remembered that when Columbus set out, he was still Baron Walden, and the family emblem and flag were also a black cross on a white background. This time, the flag he brought with him was the Bullock family flag with a red background and a three-hatted golden eagle. He did not prepare a white background with a black cross. If he met Columbus's fleet on the sea, they might not recognize him. So, Marin went to Baron Sandro and asked for a lot of white cloth and black ink, and made several simple white-bottomed black cross flags on the spot. Then, the two ships took these flags to the waters south of the Canary Islands and cruised all day long. It was already July, and the Canary Islands were still quite hot. After all, it was an African island. Although it wasn't too hot because of the sea breeze, people in this era all wore robes. Those rich people, wearing silk robes, are not too hot. But if they wear woolen robes, it will be quite hot. After all, woolen cloth is not as breathable as silk. Marin was even more direct. During his stay in Las Palmas, he went directly to a local tailor to make a few short-sleeved t-shirts and shorts. Then, he put them on and went swimming on the beach. Originally, Marin wanted to wear a short t-shirt and shorts to swim. However, Europeans at that time were still very conservative. He would be considered a hooligan if he wore that. So, he could only wear a short-sleeved t-shirt and shorts similar to the uniforms of later football players to swim. It's no wonder that no matter how hot it is in the Canary Islands, once you soak in the water, it won't be hot anymore. At Marin's recommendation, his guards also put on the short-sleeved shirts and shorts provided by Marin on the boat and followed Marin to swim. It's funny, because all the dangerous weapons have been taken away. Now each of Marin's men carries an oak stick similar to a baseball bat to protect Marin's safety at any time. However, with baseball bats, white short-sleeved t-shirts and big shorts, these guards don't look like city soldiers, but like a huge baseball team. There were also local thugs in Las Palmas. At first, they saw Marin and his group of strangely dressed people and wanted to come up and cause trouble. Then, the thugs who came to provoke were beaten away by baseball bats. Later, dozens of local thugs came to get back at them. They also brought various sticks, but after a few hits from the Marin baseball team, these dozens of thugs were all beaten like baseballs. That's not all. After they were beaten, the city defense guards under Baron Sandro also arrived and took all these people away and detained them. Baron Sandro actually disliked Marin, an unruly noble who liked to show his arms and legs. However, the other party might be a Spanish count, so he couldn't say anything and just let Marin do whatever he wanted. Out of boredom, Marin asked a local woman to help him sew a leather ball. Because there was no air pump, Marin filled the leather ball with hair like the ancients did. In this way, a football was born. Every day before taking a bath, Marin and his guards would play beach soccer on the beach, not the 5-side game, but the standard 11-side game. The guards acted as players, while Marin himself used a wooden whistle purchased from a local craft to act as the referee. After all, these guys have never played football, not only are their footwork very rough, but they also like to use their hands to catch the ball. When the football flies through the air, some of them will grab the rebound like playing basketball. Marin was furious, blew the whistle repeatedly, took out the red cloth, yes, red cloth, because there was no red card, and the yellow cloth, and sent many people off. Of course, Marin found someone to replace the people who were sent off. Because, with the behavior of these real rough guys, if they blew the whistle a few more times, there would be no one on the field. Even so, there were still frequent fights on the beach. After all, his guards were a bunch of belligerent tough guys. Once they started fighting, it was inevitable that the movements would be big and rough. However, it was also exciting to watch. Although the competition was fierce, when it came to the final kick, the referee Marin often laughed. Because it was their first time playing football, these guards had no shooting skills at all. Therefore, it was normal to miss the ball, and it was rare to kick the ball correctly. So, the ball was flying all over the field. Marin was accidentally hit by a flying football. But Marin was still happy and didn't care at all. After the game, Marin led all the guards to swim in the sea wearing short-sleeved shirts and shorts. Those who couldn't swim just soaked and washed in the shallow water. After swimming, they all lay on the beach and let the abundant sunshine dry them and their clothes. Unfortunately, there were no sunglasses in this era. Lying on the beach, Marin couldn't open his eyes. So when he lay down, Marin simply covered his eyes with the red and yellow cloths used as red and yellow cards. Chapter 266 Prince John. It was also a coincidence that the speedboat that Baron Sandro sent to the mainland to verify encountered the Spanish fleet that came to the Canary Islands for inspection. What's more, the person in charge of the inspection was the Spanish Crown Prince John. Both sides were flying Spanish flags, so naturally they had to greet each other. So Sandro's messenger simply asked His Royal Highness the Prince for confirmation. As a witness present at the time, Prince John was naturally aware of the truth of the incident. So, Prince John simply nodded and acknowledged the truth of the incident. In this way, the messenger did not have to return to the port of Cadiz, but turned around and went to Las Palmas with the prince's fleet. His Royal Highness is the same age as Marin and is now 21 years old. The Spanish kings naturally wanted to train their sons, so they sent Prince John to inspect the navy and lead the fleet to inspect the Canary Islands. This job is not dangerous. Because Spain has no enemies in the Atlantic Ocean. Although Portugal is powerful, it will not attack Spanish ships at will. Because the two sides have already signed a peace treaty and divided the world. Moreover, Spain is not easy to mess with. The fleet led by Prince John was not easy to deal with. There were 6 warships, loaded with soldiers and artillery. Moreover, their displacement, the smallest of which was about 180 tons. Prince John was very grateful to Marin for saving his life. Moreover, he felt bad that Marin only asked for a few colonies in the wild continent. After all, the wild continent was not India. It seemed that there was no money at all, and it would take a lot of manpower and material resources to explore the route. Besides, sailing was also very dangerous. If you encountered a shipwreck, you were unlucky. A few days ago, the latest news came from Germany. Marin, who had saved him, actually relied on a barony with only a few small islands to send troops to conquer a county, and the progress was rapid. He swept the entire county within half a month. What surprised Prince John was that Marin was actually the descendant of the former earl who was overthrown in the county and had the legal right of inheritance. His father-in-law, Maximilian I, also acknowledged this and sent a message to his daughter, Margaret of Austria, Prince John's wife. So Prince John heard about this from his wife. Margaret of Austria is now 5 months pregnant and is nursing her baby in Toledo, the capital of Castile. Thinking of this, Prince John is somewhat grateful to Marin. Because if Marin had not saved him, he would have died. His wife, Princess Margaret, would also become a widow, and would not leave any children. Whether Margaret is pregnant with a boy or a girl, as long as she survives, she will become the heir to the kingdom of Aragon and Castile after Prince John, and his sisters will not be given the chance. Prince John really didn't want the descendants of the King of Portugal to become the heir to the Spanish throne after his death, even if that was his eldest sister's son. Because, when Marin rescued the prince last time, he had said provocatively that the prince's illness might be murdered by the Portuguese. After all, the prince fell ill, but after attending the wedding of his eldest sister and Manuel I, it was very likely that the Portuguese murdered him. After all, as long as the prince died, the first heir would be his eldest sister Princess Isabella. It seemed that Manuel I was very likely to murder the prince. Moreover, it seems that the appearance of Marin interfered with history. Princess Isabella, who was supposed to die in childbirth in 1498, did not die in childbirth, but gave birth to a healthy Prince Miguel safely. Of course, it was useless to survive, because Prince John did not die and made his wife Margaret pregnant. As long as the child survived, the other Spanish princesses would have to stand aside. Because his wife was pregnant, Prince John was filled with joy. His gratitude to Marin was naturally sincere. When the prince heard that Marin was staying in Las Palmas, he was on his way to the Canary Islands for inspection and hoped to talk to Marin. As an idealistic young man, Prince John was also very interested in Marin's experience of conquering a county with the barony of a few small islands. At his age, he was at the age of hero worship. Thinking that Marin was the same age as him and had such a great military exploit, Prince John was extremely envious. At the same age, he had just been sent out by his parents for training, while Marin had already conquered a county on his own and became the ruler of a country. Of course, if Marin knew Prince John's thoughts, he would definitely scold him. Damn it, I worked so hard to conquer a small county of more than 3,000 square kilometers, and I still have to face the pressure of the Saxons. You were born to inherit such a big country as Spain, hundreds of thousands of square kilometers, and more than 8 million people. You still envy me? I envy you, I'm almost jealous. If Marin were to choose another person to travel to, in Western Europe of this era, Marin would definitely choose to travel to become Louis XII or Henry VIII, both of which would give him the opportunity to safely take over a powerful country. For example, if Marin traveled to become Louis XII, as long as he was given 10 years, he would definitely be able to build France, which was already extremely powerful, into a universal country, and then wield a big stick to crush all of Europe. Unfortunately, he was not, he just traveled to become a wandering knight. Therefore, he had to rely on himself to get everything, little by little, and he had to face various challenges and blows on the road to success. When Marin first saw Prince John, he was shocked. Especially, Prince John brought a fleet with him. Marin was worried to death. He was afraid that when the prince saw Columbus's spice fleet, his eyes would turn red and he would have evil intentions, and he would rob him or something. However, after a few days of contact with the prince, Marin discovered that although Prince John was the son of the shrewd Spanish kings, he had never been exposed to dark things since he was a child. At the age of 21, Prince John was still very naive and kind. This is not surprising. As the only son of the two kings of Spain, Prince John has been the most precious treasure in the whole of Spain. He has been pampered since childhood and has had little chance to see the dark side. Naturally, his character is still relatively innocent. Prince John's parents grew up in crisis, had a strong sense of crisis, and were naturally more cunning. Although Isabella I was noble since childhood, her brother Henry IV was not kind to her. Because they were half-siblings. Henry IV also changed his mind about Isabella I's marriage and randomly designated a marriage partner for Isabella I. In the end, Isabella I had to flee the marriage to fight back, and fled to Aragon and married Ferdinand II. It was precisely because of the various bad experiences in her childhood that Isabella I was trained to be scheming since childhood, otherwise she would not have been able to escape from her marriage successfully. Ferdinand II was not the heir to the throne since he was a child. He had an older brother, Charles, and a sister, Blanca. Ferdinand II's mother, Juana, was also the second wife of King Juan II of Aragon. However, Juana was more calculating and good at palace fighting. Under her instigation, Juan II actually killed his son and daughter born to his ex-wife, clearing the way for Ferdinand II to inherit the throne. Growing up in such a palace fighting environment, Ferdinand II was naturally very calculating. But Prince John, the son of the two kings, had no one to fight with since he was a child. His sisters were all married and would not fight with him. Therefore, without a sense of crisis, Prince John naturally did not develop any vicious mind. In fact, during the chat, the outspoken Prince John was tricked by Marin into revealing many secrets of Spain. Of course, Marin would not underestimate Prince John because his wife, Margaret of Austria, was a strong woman. You know, originally in history, after the death of the prince, Margaret returned to the Netherlands where she grew up and lived as a widow. Later, after the death of the handsome King Philip, she was entrusted by her father Maximilian I to be the regent of the Netherlands and teach her young nephew Charles V. During the regency of the Netherlands flourished, Antwerp became a famous trade center in Europe, and the Netherlands became the most important money bag of the Habsburg family. Charles V was even brought up by his Aunt Margaret, and she also taught him. As for the reputation of Charles V, anyone who has read European history knows it. Therefore, no matter how simple Prince John is, with such a scheming wife behind him, there will be no big trouble in the future. Fortunately, Princess Margaret was in Toledo to take care of her baby and did not come with Prince John. Otherwise, with Margaret's scheming mind, she would have encouraged the prince to kill and rob after seeing so many spices in Columbus's fleet. After he was relieved, Marin began to treat Prince John as a brother, and he even boasted to the prince every day, describing his experiences of ambushing King Charles VIII of France, defeating the more powerful Frisian noble republic, and rapidly conquering the county of East Frisia. He exaggerated himself as a great military commander, and fooled the simple Prince John. After a while, Prince John had already become a fan of Marin. This can't be blamed on Prince John's stupidity. In fact, the 3 wars in which Marin became famous were indeed legendary. In each battle, the weak defeated the strong, and they were all big wins. In the face of the ironclad facts, coupled with Marin's YY novel-like boasting, it is not surprising that the young and ignorant Prince John was convinced.